raise your glass up high. Turn it up, it's time. Tall boy on the line. Everything will last. Raise your...
Welcome back to episode 266 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, tonight it's flowing in a very familiar direction for Gaz, ain't it, dude?
Yeah, evening all, evening the world. Hope you're all well out there in listener land. I'm really looking forward to this. It's a topic that I have some knowledge of, not vast amounts of knowledge, but some knowledge. So I'm looking forward to our guest sort of educating us both really on the issue that we're going to talk about without giving sort of too much away as such. But yeah, really looking forward to this.
Indeed. So, Carly, did you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Carly. I am nearly 40 and I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. So it was about 3 and a little bit years ago when I was diagnosed. I won't go into it in too much detail straight away, but basically I was on medication for about 2 years and then kind of realised that it just did not work for me and it wasn't the right choice. So now I manage my ADHD holistically and I've then became an ADHD coach to try and sort of share that message with people who, for whatever reason, choose to not go down the medication path.
There you go. So quite an interesting aspect there to it. So, you know, like Gaz is, as we said, you're fairly familiar, aren't you, with ADHD because of your day job, and obviously slightly different as we were just discussing in the green room there at the start. The people that you work with, you know, have had sort of a diagnosis much earlier in life. So, Carly, tell us about that then. How did that come about to be? Because it's actually, I'm not going to say it's fairly common, but it's not as uncommon as it used to be now of folks being diagnosed much later in life with ADHD.
Yeah, I think it's people. It's really frustrating as well at the moment because people are saying it's this trend to have ADHD now because more and more people are being diagnosed. But it wasn't that long ago, and I don't know the exact dates, and I'm annoyed now that I don't have this ready, but it wasn't that long ago that the NHS didn't even recognise adult diagnosis. I think it was about 2008, so it's really not been that long. But the reason I ended up going for so I didn't really know a lot about ADHD before I was diagnosed. I was in that group of people who just thought it was kind of naughty school boys as well, not girls really. But I had a friend at work she'd been formally diagnosed with it. And then I had another friend who kind of self-diagnosed. And it was my self-diagnosed friend who very politely suggested to me one day, as we were talking about his diagnosis, he was kind of like, Callie, do you think that maybe you might have ADHD? And I was like, I have no idea why you're saying that. It wasn't like that I was offended. I didn't know enough about it. And I was like, I don't know why you'd say that. And then we kind of moved on. And then when I saw my other friend, maybe about a week later, who'd had this formal diagnosis, I said to her, like, so Dan suggested that maybe there's a chance I might have ADHD. What do you think? And she was just like, oh my God, Callie, of course you've got ADHD. Like, look at the state of you. Like, of course you do. And I was like, what do you mean? So she kind of went through a few sort of questions and said, well, do you do this? Do you do that? And I was like, yeah, I do that. Oh, I don't do that. And I was like, oh my God, like, wow. So typical ADHD as well. I then hyper-focused on ADHD and was like, I need to learn everything there is about it. I need to figure out if I do have it. Went away, I did all the quizzes that you can do that are all online, and there's a bit of the rage at the moment of people doing it. I mean, I don't know if TikTok was around then, but it was kind of before this whole like influencer thing started with ADHD as well. So I was doing all these quizzes online anyway, and it was just coming up that I definitely had ADHD. So when I actually looked into being diagnosed, this was about sort of August time, 3 years ago. So whatever that was, 2022, it must have been 2021. It would have been 2021, wasn't it? The wait list even then were really bad for the NHS. I mean, they're getting worse continuously. But I just absolutely couldn't wait. There was no way that I was prepared to wait sort of 3-5+ years to get diagnosed. So I just went private straight away. It wasn't cheap. It cost, I mean, all in all, I probably spent about £2,000 because you pay for your actual assessment and your diagnosis, but then if you get put on medication, which is kind of what they seem to do with everyone really at the start, is you have to pay for titration as well, and then you have to pay for private prescriptions and everything. But yeah, so I just went down the private route because I just absolutely couldn't wait for the NHS.
Wow. That's not the first time we've heard that, is it, Gaz?
No, and the NHS does an amazing job, but unfortunately they're overrun. And I'm not going to sit here and sort of say either they are fit for purpose or they're not fit for purpose at the moment. But they do amazing work, and there's lots and lots of people out there that, well, the whole of the NHS does amazing things. But I think you're probably looking at maybe demand outstripping sort of supply at the moment. I think so. We hear lots of stories where people have said, unfortunately, I wasn't prepared to wait and therefore went down the private route. One question that I suppose I wanted just to kick off with really was, you mentioned that your friend sort of said, "Oh, well, of course you have it, Carly." What was it that made them think that you had? How was it sort of manifesting itself in you? What was sort of some of the things that you were either doing or fixating on for some of our uneducated, I don't mean that in a nasty way, in terms of ADHD, uneducated people? How does it manifest itself, and then how did you find it manifested itself in yourself?
So looking back to, I think, her view of it as well, was my scattiness. I have like zero working memory. Like I can remember really specific things from when I was like a child, but like if you asked me what I had for my tea, I'd really struggle to remember. So my like general working memory has always been really poor. My planning, my organisation, but I think as well like my hyperfixation. So one of my things, which is quite common for people with ADHD, especially women, is like crafting. I'm always doing a different craft, like every other week. I'm buying all the stuff for it, and then I do it, and then I get bored, and I start another one. And I think and this has become a lot more apparent now I've had my diagnosis, and because getting diagnosed with certain like neurodivergencies is becoming more popular, but you do seem to attract other people with like ADHD. So when I actually looked around at like my friends and other people, and especially now, like I do seem to, I look around at all my friends and I'm like, yeah, there's definitely something there and there's something there kind of thing. So I think it was that as well. Yeah.
Because there is a perception, and again, you sort of touched on it right at the start, really, that, it historically, I suppose it's always been perceived to be, it's the naughty boys and it's a lad thing and it's a boy thing, and it's I suppose starts, well, I say slightly pre-teen, but early teens, and it's just that naughty boy syndrome, and it obviously isn't that, and it clearly isn't that. So I'm just fascinated by really whether or not sort of growing up as such you had anything like this, and then because either the diagnosis that they weren't as prevalent when you were growing up, or it's just more in the public persona now, and it's one of those things that, do you always feel as though you had it, or was it something you feel as though you genuinely developed later on in life and then got the diagnosis on the back of that?
With ADHD, I was just about to say that you're basically born with it, like it's some stuff in your brain and it's there all the time. However, there is like a camp of people at the moment who do feel that you're not necessarily born with it and it actually comes from trauma. I'm in the camp that believes that you are born with it, but it then kind of causes trauma, or because, especially when you're not diagnosed, or if trauma does happen as well as that, then it makes the ADHD symptoms worse. But I was actually lucky that I still had some school reports. So I've still got some reports from primary school and from high. I mean, I'm nearly 40, but my parents just kept everything and then I've kept them. So I had reports from both primary school and high school. And when you read them, it's just like, they all just say she talks too much, she's daydreaming, she could do so well if she just paid attention. And it's the same thing throughout all my sort of school years. But one of the things that I learned recently, and then it became so obvious when I was told it, that when you think about ADHD, like the H is for hyperactivity, and you think about the sort of naughty schoolboys who can't sit still and whatever, it's not like that for girls. But actually, and I can't speak for all women with ADHD, all girls with ADHD, but a lot of us, that hyperactivity is there, but it's just in our heads. So it's the constant thoughts, and there's all this stuff going on, but we're not actually, you don't see that. It's all going on in here. And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. Because my brain, my mind is just constantly 1,000 miles an hour. And I was really like, it was a really like fascinating thing for me to learn, and for me to then realize, like, absolutely, I am hyperactive. I'm not like on the outside hyperactive. Sometimes I am. I can have like, I feel like I get zoomies a little bit, you know, like when dogs get zoomies. Sometimes I get a bit like that. But generally, my hyperactivity is all in my head.
That's interesting. So it sounds to me then, your diagnosis has helped you probably have a better understanding about yourself. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. My whole life made so much more sense. But my diagnosis also brought a lot of anger and a lot of resentment from the fact that I didn't get diagnosed as a kid and I didn't get the help I needed. And, you know, I was probably going into this in more detail maybe, but I spent a lot of my life, and I mean a lot of my life, like hating myself because everybody told me, can I swear? I should have checked this.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Everybody told me I was a bit shit and that was a bit of a dickhead and that I wasn't like a good person. I wasn't a good friend because, you know, I'd constantly forget that I'd arranged to see people and, you know, things like that. So it helped with that because I was like, right, well, at least that's why. But then it was annoying because it's like, yeah, but if I knew that before, I could have maybe got a bit of support or even just said to people, look, I'm a bit crap sometimes because I've got ADHD or whatever. So yeah, it did bring about quite a lot of like anger and resentment, and not, you know, anger at my parents, but kind of a little bit as well because I had a little bit of a tough time. And, you know, if things had been different and there'd have been a more understanding of it, then, you know, that my childhood and certain things might have been a bit different for me and a bit easier.
Mm.
And how do you think sort of your friendship group now, or you know, your wider sort of friendship group and your acquaintances have sort of taken that news? You know, have you had anybody, not necessarily that resents you as such, but you know, have they all been really accepting of the fact that you have now had this diagnosis, and they've obviously been very, very supportive? Or have there been a couple of people that have not quite shied away from it or shunned away, but because maybe they don't necessarily understand it enough? Because human nature is sometimes we shy away from things we don't actually understand. And I'm just curious again as to how your sort of friendship group and you know, work and everything else sort of responded once you had that diagnosis.
With regards to my friendship group, like my friendship group's definitely got smaller as I've got older as well, because I do find it harder to stick to stuff and to keep, I'm the worst for texting people back and like responding and stuff. So I think it's kind of naturally got a little bit smaller as I've got older as well.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that. It's easier for me. The friends I kind of do have and that I'm still like close to are very understanding, and you know, I can go months and months without like texting people or whatever, and they're okay with that. Or they'll just message me and go, Carly, you still haven't replied, like what's the crack, kind of thing, and they're okay with it and they're really understanding, which is good. But yeah, I have lost a few, but I think they kind of came and went before my diagnosis, really. But my work, so that's a funny one. So I was in work at one job when I got my diagnosis. They were quite good at first. They were because I'd literally only just started actually, and then I got my diagnosis, and then when I started titration, when I first started my medication, I didn't take to it very well, and I felt quite sick and stuff. So they let me have like a couple of weeks off, and they were like really good about that, and that was great. But then fast forward a few months, I had a particular lead on our project I was on who I tried to sort of explain to him, like, you know, look, sometimes I do forget to do stuff, and I can be a bit, you know, whatever. But if you just remind me, like, I'm happy for you to constantly nudge me, like, whatever, just to make it a little bit easy, because I do have ADHD and I find stuff a little bit hard sometimes. He basically said to me, ADHD isn't a real thing and you won't be using that as an excuse. So I was like, okay. So I went to HR and I was like, look, you're not allowed to do this. It's within the Disability Act, like whatever. And they basically said that he's too good of a. I used to work in IT, and he was a developer basically. They said he's too good. They're not going to say anything to him because they don't want to lot ruffle his feathers. So you just have to kind of get over it. So that wasn't great.
No.
I left that job for part like reasons to do with that and everything. Went and got another job, but then that ended up not working out that well either because they were amazing at first. Like I told them from the get-go. And what I actually decided at that job was that I wasn't, because I spent so long masking and, you know, pretending to, because even though I didn't know I had ADHD, I knew I needed to behave differently to like what I want, how I would normally behave. So I always used to just like change my behavior around people because I knew that I'd get into trouble or I would be annoying if I was myself. So I spent so long doing that. And then because I could actually kind of put a name to it and be like, well, I'm like this because I've got ADHD and I'm gonna just roll with that and I'm gonna be kind of proud of it almost. So I told them straight away, and within like a week I told the whole team, and I was like, look, this is who I am. I'm not pretending I'm anyone else. I'm really good at what I do, but sometimes you might need to nudge me, or sometimes I might like interrupt you because I'm just so excited about something or whatever. They were all really good, but then within like about 10 months, it was a startup, and I just had so much responsibility, and it was so outside of my original job role, and they wanted me to wear like a million hats, and I'd kind of gone to them and said, I can't keep doing this. You know, just my role is quite senior. I know it has a lot of responsibility, and that's fine, but you want me to do all these different things. I need you to just tell me what it is you need me to do, and let's pick one thing or two things. But they just kind of it was too much for them to support me. And in the end, I knew that if I didn't leave, I would either completely lose my shit and get fired, or I would just have a complete mental breakdown and a burnout. So I quit. And that kind of ended my career in tech, which was such a shame because I did quite a lot, and I was quite proud of being like a woman in tech, and I did quite a lot in that kind of community, and I really wanted to be able to, you know, do really well with that. But I feel like it failed me really, and I feel like it's because they just didn't want to support. And I didn't need much from them. And I told them what I needed as well. I made it really simple. But yeah, so my experience of work has not been great, sadly.
See, that's such a shame. Just because, you know, yes, you look at, you know, certain protected characteristics and it's really, I say really difficult. Obviously, it's illegal to discriminate against these protected characteristics. It's not really difficult. It's actually legal you know, so, and also the reasonable adjustments that you would, that, you know, and there's very, very simple things that even, you know, in education that we can do for some of our students, and it would be the same for anybody out there in the world of employment, is just, you know, what you would class as reasonable adjustments, and go to them and say, right, can we make these reasonable adjustments? And actually employers should be doing that. They absolutely, because it's a protected characteristic, they should be making those reasonable adjustments. So it's really, it saddens me really in a way just to know that, you know, and to hear that maybe there are employers out there, and again, it might go back to that lack of understanding, maybe. But you've been really upfront about it, and you've told them about it, and it just feels to me as though, you know, there was missed opportunities there to put some reasonable adjustments in place, and actually keep your expertise and keep you on, and work with you to work alongside the diagnosis. So that just makes me quite sad in a way.
Yeah, it is always a shame to hear stories like that, and unfortunately, I think we've always, maybe once or twice in our career, encountered something where it might not have affected us, but you're kind of aware of a situation in work, aren't you, where you think, yeah, that's not good. That isn't how it should be. And it's certainly a shame with that then. So taking you back to your ADHD there, when you were saying your position was affected there because you had a reaction to the medication. And that's one of the routes we wanted to go down tonight, is actually to find some alternatives that may or may not work for other people. Certainly work for you, which is fantastic to hear. So what was the reaction to the medication that you had originally, if you don't mind my asking?
No, absolutely not. So first off, when I first went on, so I was on Elvance, which is, I can't say the full name, but it's lisdexamfetamine or something. So it's basically speed. Like it's not, but it is really. It's not the stuff you'd get on the street, but it's a stimulant. It's the same idea. So I was put on that, and the first thing that I noticed for myself was that, and that was quite a big factor in it all, was that it worked great for like a couple of weeks, and then I needed more, so my dosage had to go up. Worked well for a couple of weeks, then I needed more, so my dosage had to go up. So it was only a matter of maybe 3 months before I was on the max dosage that you can take of that, which is 70 milligrams a day. So that kind of like straight away didn't leave me with loads of options, you know, to be able to sort of move around. And just to add into that as well is, yes, there are options to try other meds, but that meant going back to the clinic, paying for another review and paying for another round of titration, which we had to scrape together the money to do it to start with. So that was a barrier for me, was the financial cost of that. So I was really quick up to the full dosage. The side effect that sort of started straight away that affected me was sweating. So I just was overheating constantly. And the job I had at that point, I was a IT consultant, and I spent quite a lot of time going to London, and we worked with some really cool companies, and then we had to go to their offices, and we were like, you know, on the tube going around to London and stuff. And to be fair, I could walk maybe 20 meters and I'd be absolutely sweating, and going into these fancy offices in London, and I'm like literally wet through. It was so embarrassing, and I felt I had to explain myself a lot, but I didn't really want to have to do that. I wasn't ashamed or embarrassed or anything, but I just didn't want to have to do that. I would have just rather not been really sweaty. But that was really horrible. But when I was diagnosed, my experience, my journey was that it was like, right, it's meds or nothing. You know, the clinic I went through didn't offer anything else. There was no other therapy options, any holistic, anything. It was just like, what we offer is you can go on meds or you can stay as you are. Well, I didn't want to stay as I am, so I felt like I didn't really have a choice. And because they were working and things were easier, I was like, I'm just going to put up with this sweating and hopefully it will get better. It never did. But the other things that happened as well was that I got headaches. So I used to suffer quite a lot with headaches anyway, and I took tablets for that. But the headaches sort of started to come back, and I'd get the odd migraine. I've suffered most of my life with anxiety and depression, which I now know is probably just off the back of undiagnosed ADHD. But that got worse. My anxiety especially got a lot worse. And because like I said, the job I had, and like being in London and going to these offices and meeting stakeholders all the time and stuff, like I had just so much anxiety. It was horrible. But my depression also got like worse as well. And I just felt sad a lot. Something that's quite common again for people with ADHD is having like little habits, little like stimming and things, or picking. And I have a habit of picking the skin around my fingers, and that can get quite bad. And I have been known to kind of have a little infection and things. But when I was on my tablets, that got so much worse. I was constantly just like, it looks horrible as well. And again, like with the work I did and meeting people, like my hands would be like bloody and like ripped up basically. So there was that. It really affected my sleep. So if I was able to get to sleep, it was really poor quality sleep, but it took me a long time to get to sleep as well. I think that's probably about. I talked a lot, especially when I first took my tablets. I mean, I talk a lot anyway, and anybody who knows me, if you ask anybody who's ever met me, they'll be like, "Oh, she talks so much." But because I mean, it is a little bit like when you first take it, like you just had a bit of speed and it just blah, 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 blah. So on a morning, like in our meetings at work, I would just take over the whole thing, and they're not about anything, not about work. I'd just be blah, blah, blah. So yeah.
Not ideal, that. No. I thought when you were saying there and you needed to increase the medication, I thought, yeah, it does take a lot like speed, yeah, to be fair.
Yeah.
That's mad. So what alternatives then have you come across which you found beneficial?
So just to kind of, I'd quite like to just tell a story of why I ended up coming off my medication, because I think that's quite important as well. For other people who maybe want to try alternatives as well. And I would like to just kind of put in a disclaimer here that I'm not against medication, because it's absolutely a personal choice and it absolutely does work for people. What I am against is that we're not told that there are other options. It is very much, especially when you go through like a clinic, when that's where they make their money from, you know, is then getting you onto the medication and stuff. And there's risks with taking that kind of medication long term as well. So I think it's really important that people have an option, but I'm not against it. But what happened with me is in October 2023, there was like an ADHD medication shortage. It was actually worldwide. You may or may not have heard about it in the news, but it was. I had like a friend who was she was Indian, and she was like, oh, I'll message my friend in India. They're a pharmacist. Couldn't get anything. I had a friend who was Greek. It's like, I'll message my friend in Greek. We'll be able to get. Absolutely, there was just no drugs anywhere to get. So what I did was I panicked, and I felt a little bit like, what am I going to do? I can't go back to life before my medication because it was horrible. I need this to live. I need this to keep my job. By that point as well, like I'd got quite a good job, and it was all working really well for me. And I'd got quite a senior job, and I was like, I can't lose this. Like I need this job. So what I did was I reached out to a guy that I'd seen on LinkedIn who I'd been following, who specializes in like a drug-free method. And he doesn't take medication. He's never taken ADHD medication, but what he did do is he kind of self-medicated through like caffeine and booze and working long hours and stuff, and ended up having like 7 seizures. So he was then unable to take medication. So he tried to find out, like discover ways of managing his ADHD without it. So I was like, right, I'm going to contact him. And I said to him, I do not want to stop my medication. I need it. I genuinely really believed that I needed it to survive. So I was like, but what I want to do is figure out some ways to manage while I can't get hold of it, while we've got these shortages. So he was like, yeah, that's fine. And that was by the time we started working together, that was like early December 2023. So what he introduced me to was cold water. So I started with like cold showers, meditation, a bit of breath work, and then just kind of like looking at my diet as well, because your brain and your gut is like massively connected. So what you eat is really important. And because obviously ADHD is all in the brain and everything, it's really important to have like a good diet. And then obviously there were still like the simple sort of lifestyle changes and trying to get out more and doing that kind of thing as well. But the main thing that I took away from my time with him was the cold water and the meditation. So I started with the cold showers. So like the first week was literally just, I'd have my normal shower and then have like 10 seconds at the end in the cold. And I absolutely hated it. I really did. But I kind of powered through. And then it was just before Christmas that we kind of started. But then he was away for a couple of weeks and it was Christmas and I kind of got out of the habit of everything. So we started again at January last year. And I started like really committing to the cold showers and everything. And I also joined, he does like a meditation group, which I actually now co-host with him. And every morning at 7:30, we do a Zoom call and people can join. And we do like 2 minutes of breath work, then 15 minutes of meditation. So I do that every day now. And that absolutely gets me started. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But yeah, so I was doing the cold showers and I was really committing, and I was getting to like 2 minutes at the end of my shower. And then sometimes I'd even just have just a cold shower. I mean, I hated every second of it. Like I really struggled with that. And I still do now. I hate a cold shower, but I did feel like it was helping a little bit. But then towards the end of February last year, I went on a retreat. And the reason that it was like a woman's retreat, it's called the Rewilding, and I've actually been on it 3 times now because it's amazing. But the thing that really stood out to me, and the reason I wanted to go on it, was because part of it was wild swimming. So I was like, oh, I'm doing this cold water stuff, like that's going to be amazing. I'll give that a go. And the second day we went and swam in, it was in the lakes, and we swam in Ullswater, and it was amazing and it was really good. And when I got out of the water, and I say this all the time, but like, it genuinely felt like I could see better. Like I've actually got all right eyesight, but the only way I can really explain it is it felt like I just had this like clear vision, and it was like I didn't have any brain fog. I felt like I had energy, and it was amazing. But what happened the next day, we then did a hike up a little bit of a small mountain, and on the way back we kind of walked alongside this stream, and there was a bit where there's a bit of a plunge pool. So we did like a plunge in this little thing. And honestly, my life changed in that moment. Like I was in that water. It was February, so it was absolutely freezing cold. And I got out and I was just like, holy fuck. Like I could literally do anything. So I actually, at this point, I was like under my big towel and everything, and I just had my neoprene socks on, and I was like, do you know what? And after I threw my phone towards this girl, and I was like, can you take a picture of me? Got rid of my towel, ran up a little bit of a mound, stood absolutely naked apart from my socks with like my back to her, like the lakes, like the views around me, and to take a picture of me. And I stood at the top of this thing and I was like, I am like the fucking king of the world. Like, this is amazing. I could do anything. And it like, I just had this moment where I was like, this is my future. So I got home and I ordered an ice bath. So I ditched my cold showers because I still hate them. But I try, and I do try and have an ice bath every single morning now. So I usually try and do it before my meditation. So I get in the ice bath about 7 o'clock. I go in for about 3 minutes. Currently this morning it was about 3.8. It's really cold at the moment, and I'd really quite like it to be slightly warmer. Go in there for 3 minutes, then I do my meditation, and that's what I do now. That's what I got rid of. And then, so while I was on that retreat, my coach had said to me, like, we'd sort of agreed, I'm going to not take any medication while I'm away. I'd already been having to like wean myself off it a little bit because I wasn't able to get it. So I was taking a lot less than I had been taking. So I was like, right, let's just have a few days off, just see how you feel, see how it goes. And then, so I didn't take any, and then I never took any again. And that wasn't the plan. I was going to start, take it again when I got back, but kind of maybe eventually wean myself off it, because like I said, I didn't want to come off my meds because I thought I needed them, but I just never took them again after that. So it's been, actually, it was the 21st of February 2024 that I took my last medication. So it's like a year and 2 days since I take it.
That's impressive.
It is, and lots of people talk about sort of cold water therapy and the fact that, even people that have high pressure jobs and quite stressful lifestyles and stuff, and you do a bit of the research, and I'm by no means an expert on it, but you talk to various people in various different sort of walks of life, and they talk about the fact that it really genuinely sort of almost invigorates you, and it genuinely does invigorate you, and my own experience really is going to the odd water park somewhere and they got a plunge pool and you jump in there for like, I don't know, like a second or 2 seconds, you jump out, you're like, fucking hell, that was cold, sort of thing. But I suppose that there's that sort of shock bit where you're getting like, wow, like it is freezing. But lots and lots and lots of people swear by it, and they swear by ice baths, and there's obviously lots and lots of research around the regenerative nature of ice baths, and that's why lots of sports people do it, and they take ice baths and stuff, and just actually the benefits that it can do, I suppose, from a physical and physiological point of view. But actually then it would then, I suppose, not be coincidence then that actually it can then help you mentally as well. So and when you put the two things together, I absolutely can understand why people subscribe to that. And it's amazing that, you're able to effectively go cold turkey without really wanting to, in terms of not being on your meds, and that's an amazing story.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Like one of the things that you do, I don't sort of follow it in the same way that Gaz does, but my learnings about ice baths is I don't like them. I've done the same sort of things that Gaz has done. I've not felt invigorated at all. I felt horrible. I didn't enjoy it one bit. So I don't know whether that tells you more about me or you. I don't know. I'll let you figure that out. But Eastern religions, there's a lot of meditation in that, and there's a lot of, I think it's like, I'm sure it's part of Hinduism as well. Like the ice baths and the kawa and the water going on the head first. It's all part of how it, that level of control and that level of focus. So what was it that resonated with you then? Do you understand the science behind it and how it benefits you?
Yeah. So don't test me on it. But I have. So I say to everyone that cold water changed my life. It absolutely did. So what I actually did a few months ago was I took a course. So I'm now technically a cold water therapy practitioner. I am doing another course though that actually starts in about a week's time, because that course was very good in giving me all the science and everything. So I learned quite a lot, but I'm doing another one to become a cold water facilitator, because that actually has some in-person stuff, and it also has like a first aid bit attached to it as well, which is really good. But with regards to like for people with ADHD, getting in cold water for anything between 2 to 3 minutes, anything that's less than 14 degrees can give you up to a 250% boost in dopamine. And dopamine is usually what people with ADHD are lacking in. So you've immediately got that boost. So what happens with, like, if you think about the stimulant medication I was on, I think that the boost it can give you in dopamine is up to about 1,000% because obviously it's a stimulant and everything. But it is a drug and it goes into your system and you kind of have that high and it's all great. But I found as well, anyway, I'm obviously speaking from my experiences, that you do crash like quite suddenly after taking medication. But with the cold water, it's not as big as a boost, but it's a lot mellower. You're sort of coming out of that kind of boost that you've had, and it's a lot more gentle and it's obviously a lot more natural and everything. But it also increases your norepinephrine by about 400 to 500% as well. So that's really good for your feel-good hormones, like your serotonin as well. And also it lowers your cortisol levels, so it reduces stress. So again, for people with ADHD, it's like it's very easy to get it's very easy for us to get highly stressed and things like that. So there is like so many benefits, but there's so many benefits past that as well. So as much as it's been really great for my ADHD, there's so many other benefits that you get from it. Like we were talking before we started, like I've got a bit of an injury and everything, but the cold water has actually been really good for that, and it is really helping. And when I wake up in the morning normally, because I've been asleep on my side, like I've got some muscle injury thing here, but when I'm a side sleeper and I can't help it, and I've been trying not to because it really hurts, but I get up in the morning, get in my ice bath, and it just feels so much better when I get out. But my partner does it as well. So my partner, he doesn't quite do it as often as me, but he does try as much as he can. But he actually has cystic fibrosis as well. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's like cured it or made him any better or anything, but neither of us have been poorly for since we started doing it, not really. We've not had colds, we've not had flus. And with him, when he gets a cold, like there is that risk that it can go to his chest and, can turn into a chest infection, could turn into pneumonia, whatever. Like neither of us have really been poorly with that kind of stuff since we started doing it as well. So that's obviously a massive benefit for us.
Wow, that's a ringing endorsement. That is a ringing endorsement. I'll maybe have to revisit that at some time in the near future. It might be a little bit more than the 3.8 degrees or whatever you have it at, though.
Yeah. But it's how you do it. But this is the big thing. Like everyone always says to me, "You'll never get me in an ice bath," and it's like, but I will. But it's how you do it. The main thing for me and my advice to anybody is it's all about your breathing. Because as you've probably known, you've been in the plunge pools, the first thing it does is, it takes your breath away and then you panic and you're not going to enjoy it. But so not that long ago when we had the really cold weather, we do have a chiller actually, because we bought that over summer because it was just too warm, but we didn't need it at all. We turned that off, took the lid off, and we had 4-inch thick ice. So I had to get a little axe out to break through the ice, but the water was about 0. And I could get into that and my breath wasn't taken away because I'm used to it as well, obviously, but I can kind of just relax myself enough. And when you step in, your breath wants to be taken away. But if you just really concentrate on your breath and don't think about anything else, think about how cold it is, just think, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And once you get past that, it's fine. And yes, it can hurt a little bit and it's cold and whatever. But once you get out and you've not had all that, panic in your breath and all that, and you can actually enjoy it, that's when you see the benefits. And I swear you will love it.
Wow. At the moment, it's more likely to be a whiskey in the hot
tub. So moving forward then, the next TBR ADHD episode is road testing an ice bath. Is that how it's going to work then, is it?
I do have some harebrained ideas, and even that's a bit out there for me. But maybe we'll see. So one of the things you said then about your ADHD, and it's interesting that you say it, because we've had a couple of people on the podcast before who've been either neurodivergent and ADHD has been part of their diagnosis, or even when we had Della on, who runs the beer emporium in Sandbach, talking about that. She was another individual who was diagnosed with ADHD later in life and found it incredibly beneficial. And there's kind of a thing in life where people don't like to be put in a box. They don't like to be given a label. However, the one common thing I have found is that you guys, like yourself, Della, and I forget the other lady's name because my memory isn't great either, but it's just because I'm getting old. They're quite comfortable with it, quite comfortable with the label because it really helps with your understanding. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I'm not somebody who says that my ADHD is a superpower. I hate that because it's not. It's been an absolute fucking nightmare my whole life. It has, and it has been a hindrance. Now I understand it. I can work with it, and it does. Like, I got really senior in my job in tech, and it's because I'm a really good problem solver. I can think outside of the box. A lot of that's probably my ADHD. So it's not, it's not been 100% a bad thing, but I definitely don't call it a superpower. But I am, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's that I'm proud I have ADHD, but I'm proud to say that I have, I'm absolutely fine with telling anybody and everybody that I have ADHD because it explains why I am the way I am sometimes. And also I'm not ashamed of it at all, but yeah, I definitely don't think it's a superpower, but I absolutely do talk about it as much as I can. Like coming on here and I've done some talks at some different businesses and things, and I will talk about it as much as possible because I think that we should talk about it, and I think it needs to be more understood, especially because it is becoming, more and more people are being diagnosed, and there should be more understanding around it. It's not, it's not a bad thing. It's just a slight difference in your brain. It just means you just sort of have, these different nuances. But yeah, so I wanted to say I'm loud and proud, but again, I don't know if proud's the right word. But I think you know what I mean.
I guess the word I would use probably is comfortable. You're comfortable talking about it because
absolutely.
you're comfortable with understanding it, which is interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting.
I just think that again, it's amazing that that you are so comfortable talking about it. Some people won't be as comfortable. Some people, they talk about, everybody has a label these days. There's a label for this, it's a label for that, and lots of people don't want to have labels, but it shows that actually with the right label and the right level of understanding of that label, because I think that's the difference. It's the labeling just for labeling's sake and actually not having the understanding that goes behind that. So having an understanding as to actually what it is that you're going through, having that diagnosis that then allows you then to understand the way that you are and therefore work with the way that you are is amazing. And I think that's the key bit, is about talking. I absolutely agree with you, Carly. I think the breaking down of the stigma of ADHD and adult ADHD is a really important thing to do. And talking about it, and the more people that we can get talking about it in a positive way, and increasing our understanding of ADHD, whether that be in adolescent ADHD or adult ADHD, it doesn't matter. I think just raising the awareness as to some of the difficulties that these individuals might be faced with in their life, and one that I'll ask shortly, perhaps around some of the difficulties that you have had. But I think just having more of an understanding is incredibly important, and just breaking down that stigma that's attached to it, or certainly historically the stigma that's been attached. I don't think stigma's as bad as it was, and I think we are getting better. But I think historically there has been a stigma attached. And go back to what we said about the start, it was a naughty boys thing back in the day, So just go back to what the question I was going to ask. You've sort of briefly mentioned work and stuff. What other difficulties have you, if you don't mind sort of talking about it, sharing with us? What has been some of the difficulties that you've had due to the diagnosis and then moving forward?
So you mean since my diagnosis?
Yeah, since
work's obviously been difficult, and that was really disappointing, because when I did really well with my coach and kind of followed his method and was able to come off my medication, it was him who suggested that maybe I became an ADHD coach myself. But the plan was to do that, but alongside my full-time job, and build up my business, and see what happens and whether that works for me. But because I didn't get the support that I should have had at work, and I had to leave like a couple of years earlier than what I would have liked to have done. I've had to kind of go full in on my business a lot sooner than I thought I would, and that's been really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And it's quite common for people with ADHD to just kind of go in head first with stuff, and not really necessarily, because you get really excited and you want it all to happen. And that's been really difficult, and it like financially has been a massive thing, and I don't have an income, or it's starting to drip in, but not like I did in my last full-time job. But I think other than that, like, I'm not sure really I've had loads of difficulties since I've been diagnosed, apart from the work thing. Like, it took me ages to tell my mum and dad, because I genuinely thought they'd just say it's not a real thing, and like they just, and I was worried as well that they might think that I was kind of saying, you were a bit shit when I was a kid, and kind of they might feel bad. But actually, my mum was, I think because people are just talking about it a lot more now, my mum was really understanding and really quite supportive. And I think actually she was just more upset that I thought that she wouldn't be understanding. And my dad now, he absolutely has ADHD, and he now thinks he believes that. And I think if like 20 years ago I'd have tried to say that to him, he would have absolutely been like, there's nothing wrong with me, like absolutely not. He wouldn't have even accepted it. But because it's just so much more talked about now, like he follows some guy on YouTube who has ADHD, so it's like a professor that I don't know. My dad's a bit of a conspiracy theorist, to be fair, so God knows. God, I'm gonna have to tell him he can't listen. I won't be able to tell him to listen to this now.
Get him on, we'll have him on.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to talk about that, that's fine. We're happy to do conspiracy theories. That's not an issue.
But he totally like gets it now as well, which is really good. So I thought that might be a difficulty, but that wasn't. And yeah, I don't know if I have actually. I think it's actually made just everything easier, because like I said, like before I was diagnosed, like, over the last couple of decades, like I've lost friends, have sort of come and gone, and a lot of that has probably been down to me and not keeping in contact with people and whatever. But since my diagnosis, like I've still got those friends, and they get me and they understand and they're okay with it. Like I'm not saying that they think it's great, and I don't think they love how crap I can be.
Yeah,
but they're okay with it, and they accept that I'm not doing this on purpose, and I'm still here, and I still love them. I just probably won't text them for a year or whatever.
That's fair enough. So in terms of, and like you say, like Gaz says, the stigmatism around it, our perception, or my perception, I believe Gaz's perception seems to be it ain't as bad as it used to be, and that is in all likelihood down to probably the number of people now who are diagnosed with it, which would suggest that there's a better understanding of it. So for you to be diagnosed later in life, hopefully those sort of circumstances will be reduced as it gets recognized earlier, and that's what we'd hope for. But the way it must work then is, if you found out later in life, we know Della found out later in life, there must also be a percentage of people out there who are also unaware, who have ADHD, haven't been diagnosed with it, and are wondering what the fuck is wrong with me. You know what I mean? Why am I like the way I am? And I know Gaz is probably looking at me as I'm saying.
I mean, I think the point that you make is an absolutely valid one, and I think there will be people out there that will be listening to this podcast, and that we'll probably be thinking, oh well, I have that, and I struggle maybe sometimes to sort of focus on various things, but then the flip side to that is I then just become absolutely fixated on something, and I have to do absolutely everything for that, and then the next minute I'm flitting around and I've got all this stuff going on in my head, and this, that, and the other and stuff. So yeah, I think again, the more knowledge, more understanding we can get out there, and I suppose in a way that more recognition of how does it manifest itself. And I say the symptoms and stuff, but what does it look like? Is it that skittish sort of brain? Is it that daydreaming? Is it that fixation? Is it that not being able to sort of I say, because traditionally it's like not being able to sit still and always being on the move and always on the go and not being able to be calm, and that was the perception of what ADHD was years ago. And as I say, it was and it's so much more than that. And again, you've got your attention issue, and then you've got your hyperactivity issue as well alongside that. And obviously that's the ADHD, that's the full name sort of thing. But it's so much more than just not being able to sit and focus on something.
Absolutely.
And I think just from you talking about some of the things that you felt as though were going on inside your mind, and the recognition that other people might then get from that is incredible. I mean, in your line of work, I suppose you will have met lots and lots and lots of people who potentially will present with lots of different symptoms as such, and it manifests itself very, very differently in lots of different people. Can you perhaps just spend a couple of minutes talking about maybe how some people that, obviously without mentioning any names, betraying any confidences or anything, in terms of how does it present in certain people, and how the differences maybe that it presents in different people?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a saying, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, because we are all completely different. There is a lot of like general things that, that are sort of the typical, like you say, about like the focus, maybe a bit of hyperactivity, things like that. But it absolutely can, there can be massive variances as well. Like there'll be a lot of people who, and that I've sort of been exposed to, who have done really well for themselves in work. They've got really like senior, like I did, blah, blah, blah. But then there's a lot of people with ADHD who can't hold down a job at all. They can't do it. They can't commit to that. They just, can't get up on a morning. A lot of people with ADHD tend to do a lot of stuff on an evening. They're night owls. I'm not. I sleep 12 hours. I'm usually in bed by now. Like this is really late for me. But that's quite rare, because generally you find that they're up quite late. There's a lot of I think as well, like one of the big things, like especially when you go back to looking at the difference between men and women, because women have their monthly cycle, and there's a lot of hormones and different things going on at different stages. It can, even within just that one person, it can present so differently across a month. And actually, that's, you mentioned before, and I kind of did want to bring that up. Like, there's not a lot of research into ADHD in women, not like there is in men, and also a lot of it is in children. It's not in adults, because it is like a newer thing that they're kind of realizing that you don't grow out of it, and then it's still there. But like research into women and like the menstrual cycle and hormones and everything like that, it just isn't there. There's just nothing there. But actually it can, because there's a link between when you go through your cycle and your estrogen levels go up and down throughout the month. And actually low estrogen is linked to low dopamine. So when you're at certain points in your cycle, like you just absolutely feel like shit, because you've already got low dopamine, so you've got even less. So it can present differently in different people, like even just throughout the month, especially for women. But I've people come to me for all sorts of different reasons as well. Like I've had like clients that have just been like, I need you to sort my life out. Like I can't do anything, I'm really struggling. Some people just need a bit more routine in their life, and then they struggle with like planning and organization. So it's looking at things like that. But I mean, my speciality and what I want to do is help people who want to obviously do these sort of holistic methods as well. So people who are looking for ways to sort of increase their motivation and their energy and their sort of clarity, and get rid of that brain fog. That's where obviously like the meditation and the cold water comes in. But yeah, absolutely. I think the thing to remember is, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, because we're all so different.
And what's the one piece of advice then? If anybody is out there listening to this podcast and they've heard some things where they're starting to question about themselves, well, maybe I do have ADHD. What would be the advice you gave to them? The first steps that they could take.
So, because of the way that the world is at the moment, and because diagnoses are hard to get, because you either have to pay a lot of money or you have to wait a long time, but there's also an added difficulty at the moment so there's something called shared care. So when I got diagnosed privately, I was then the psychiatrist was the only person who could prescribe me it's a controlled substance, my medication. So the GP agreed that they would like give me my prescription and everything, but it was within a shared care, and it was the prescriber, the psychiatrist, that was the only person who. So if I needed my meds changing or a dosage, I'd have to go back to the psychiatrist. But anyway, at the moment, the NHS are kind of doing away with that a little bit, and a lot of doctors I think it's the particular surgeries themselves decide this, and I have no idea why, but they're starting to not take private diagnoses and they're starting to not accept them. So it's making it even harder for people to get the help they need, because they decide to pay and to be out of pocket and to get this private diagnosis, but then they won't do shared care. So they either pay for a private prescription for the rest of their life. I mean, mine were £100 a time, you know, or whatever. So my advice at the moment is, what I say to people, so I take, when I take clients as well, self-diagnosis is absolutely acceptable to me. If you've self-diagnosed, I'm still going to work with you. I'm not going to question that. You know, if you want to look into that with me, that's fine, but I'm not going to question it. My advice, and I have literally said this to people, is think about why you want a formal diagnosis, first of all, because the process to get that is really difficult at the moment. And it can be very disheartening. I was lucky because I got the help I needed at the time. But if you're desperate for certain things to happen really quickly, like, it's probably not going to happen. So that would be my first bit of advice is, do you need a formal diagnosis? If you do, because you need it because you need some sort of, I don't know, help with something like a disability allowance or something, then yeah, but if you think about why you need it. And then I suppose past that, it's just making sure that you make the right choices for what's best for you. Again, I'm absolutely not against medication, but I want people to know that there are other options. And sometimes that is alongside medication as well. So everything I teach, you can just do that alongside the medication as well to feel even better. But I think knowing that there are other options as well out there, and it doesn't have to just be, medication or one or the other. It can be both as well.
And something you said there as well as, about outgrowing. This isn't something that you can outgrow then, is it? This is something that you have now. It's not going to change. Can it diminish, or is it just a matter about controlling it through that regime or medication or whichever path you go down?
So back to my earlier, when I said about how some people believe that ADHD is caused by trauma, there is a group of people who believe that ADHD can go away. I think the general consensus, if you were to look at any, like any research that's already been done or spoke to psychiatrists and stuff, they would say that you can't outgrow it. It's an actual, like, there's a difference within your brain structure and everything that means you don't get the dopamine. So it's not just like something that you can outgrow. Your brain is different, so that it will always be different. I'm in the camp that kind of believes that. Like, I don't think you can outgrow it, but I absolutely do think it can be managed, because I am literally living proof of that. And don't get me wrong, I still have bad days and it still does affect me and I still struggle. But I'm managing it so much better than I was before medication. And then actually it's even better than I was when I was on my medication, because I don't also have all those side effects. So...
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's a great story. It is a great story out there. So realistically, then, you're obviously using sort of, like, say, holistic treatments, meditation instead of medication. That's what I should have called this
episode. It's a good hashtag.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I discovered it a bit too late, like, an hour into the episode.
58 minutes, 38 seconds in.
Oh well. Next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Time. So you're using, realistically, what percentage of people do you think that would work for? Or do you think, there's always going to be some people who just need the medication. Do you think realistically this could work for 100% of the people?
I'm not a doctor, so I couldn't say. And no, I don't think it could, because the thing is as well is that the methods that I've chosen to do, you do have to be committed to it. I have to get in an ice bath every day. Not everybody wants to do that. It might even just be that you live in a flat and it's not practical to get an ice bath. And, like, I hate cold showers. There's loads of reasons why you won't do the things I'm doing. And I think that medication, I think that the methods I use could, as long as you don't have any contraindications as to why you couldn't have an ice bath, things like that, I think it could definitely help everyone who does it. But I don't think it necessarily would be the answer, on a whole. I think there are some people who just there's something called ADHD paralysis, which is where you want to do the things and you don't even mind doing the things, like cleaning, for example. but you physically can't do it. Like there'll be times where I'll just be laid in bed and I can't get out of bed. And it's not because my arms and legs don't work, and it's not even because I don't want to do the thing. I just physically can't. And I think medication, like when I took my medication, what I used to do is I'd wake up about 6 o'clock, I'd take my tablet. It used to take about an hour and a half to kick in. And then I'd go back to sleep. And then when I woke up, I was actually able to get out of bed. So like now I still really struggle to get out of bed. And honestly, some mornings I'm having like a toddler tantrum. My partner's pulling me out of bed by my foot, and I'm not joking, because I still have that barrier to get past, to then go do the ice bath and to do my meditation. And that doesn't work for everybody.
And I suppose that goes back to, in a way, what you've just said. You know, if you've met one person with ADHD, then you've met one person with ADHD. Yeah. And for everybody's diagnosis might be different, and everybody's treatment potentially might be different, and how you would respond to the next person would be completely different, I suppose. But I think going back to the point that you made towards the start of the podcast, just having the knowledge or an option that actually medication isn't the only option. Whilst it might work for lots of people, it might not. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional in any way, shape, or form. You know, my views are my own as such. You know, the fact that potentially just knowing that medication isn't the only option, helps. And yes, there will be a significant number of people where medication is the only option for them because of all of the issues that you've just mentioned. But I think, you know, the message, I suppose, from me is, you know, that there is another alternative option if you wanted it, and to absolutely research it, investigate it, ask the questions around it, you know, and shortly, you know, we'll be asking for your socials and stuff, Carly, so how people can get in touch with you if they needed, you know, some more information and stuff. So I think, I think just for me is that just go and explore, go and try to improve your understanding, improve your knowledge, and actually look to see if there are other options out there.
Indeed. And with that, Gary, that lovely little hint that you just dropped there, did you want to tell people where they can get a hold of you if people want to talk to you about the issues that affect them, or, you know, to take your professional services?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business name is Wild Minds Wellness. So I'm on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page, but honestly, I don't like it. I don't use it that much, but it's there. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's just my name. So it's Carly Watson, and I do a lot of like posting on there and everything. I am on TikTok. It's just mostly little videos of me in my ice bath on a morning. And then I have a website, which is wildmindswellness.org. And that just tells you all the different things I do. But there's options on there to be able to get in touch with me as well. But my Instagram is basically just full of my wild swimming, because I do try and wild swim at least once a week as well, and like go look for waterfalls to swim in and everything. Because like I talk about ice baths all the time and how amazing they are, but absolutely nothing beats, like, you know, being in a pool somewhere with a waterfall behind you, like, because you've got the cold water, which is amazing for all the reasons said before, but having the nature around you as well, like, oh, you just can't beat it.
Just out of interest, and slight digression. I apologise, but we've not digressed.
We've done all right so far.
Right. We've done well, haven't we? So in terms of wild swimming, how safe is it then? You know, you do hear a few horror stories.
I mean, it's really cold water, so it can be dangerous. Like, I don't know the like technical terms of the science behind it, but when waterfalls hit, there can be like a bit of a current, and you can get sucked under a waterfall and stuff. So there is dangers, and I think anybody who goes to the beach and swims in the sea, or goes kayaking, or does anything, it's not any different. My advice, if somebody did want to go wild swimming, especially even in summer if you're new to it, but especially while it's cold, is neoprene socks and gloves are an absolute must, because your hands. I wear gloves and socks in my ice bath. Not so much. I won't, probably from about, I don't know, April, May, depending on the weather onwards. You don't need to, because it's just a lot warmer. Although actually, saying this, we do have a chiller now, so it will be colder. So I probably will still need to wear my gloves and my socks. But your hands and feet get so cold so quickly, and they just hurt. They hurt so much. A hat. I wear a hat in the ice bath as well. Sometimes I'll put my head under, like if we're doing a bit of wild swimming or anything, but having a hat ready to when you get out. But the important thing as well, and I will absolutely stress this, ice bath, cold shower or while swimming, the most important. The first thing is the breathing while you're in the water. The second thing is get warm as quickly as possible. What that doesn't mean is it doesn't mean getting into like a red hot shower, for example, and trying to warm up that way. You kind of want to warm up from the inside out. So loads and loads of warm layers, nice warm clothes, woolly hat and a hot drink, because it's the after bit. If you get in the water as well, and a lot of people call it the glow, and you've been in for so long and all of a sudden you just like feel a bit euphoric and you're like, oh my God, I could stay in here for the rest of my life. It's fine. That's actually your body saying, I'm going to start shutting down a little bit. So people stay in too long, and then that's where the hypothermia starts to set in. You want to be either out before that happens, or as soon as you start to feel like you're like, I'm going to get out now, and you just need to get dressed and get warm as quick as possible. I don't even really spend loads of time trying to get dry anymore because it takes that long. Do you remember when you were at school, you used to go swimming and you couldn't get dressed and the teachers were like, hurry up, and you're like, I'm still wet. How do I get my clothes on this quick? It's a bit like that. Just get your clothes on, chuck them on, get warm, get a hot drink, because that's the really important bit, getting warm afterwards. And just swim with a buddy, don't be stupid, and don't go to like waterfalls that are going to be ridiculously deep. You'll never know exactly how deep they are, obviously, but if smaller waterfalls and stuff are fine when it's not going to be too deep. Don't go right into the waterfall. I'd like to think that the basics, that just be smart as well.
Oh, that's good.
I'm probably just going to add, if you are going to go wild swimming, A, tell somebody that you're going. B, don't go on your own. Just join a wild swimming club, because there's plenty out there, and there'll be safe open water swim clubs and this, that, and the other. So, again, I'm by no means a professional or an expert in this field, but my advice would always be, look for like-minded people that you can go with, and you would have expertise there, and you'd have people that are very experienced at doing those things, and never go to cold water or open water on your own and just dive in and see how you get on. You know what I mean? And I know it sounds silly, but again,
absolutely the right advice.
Be sensible out there.
There is I will just plug it's nothing to do with me, but there's an organisation called Mental Health Swims, and they're across the country. And they're organised swims that you can go for free. You sign up and they have like a leader who's had some training, and you can go and you can swim with them. And they're really good for people who like want to do it for the first time. Maybe don't have because not everybody wants to do it. So you can't always find friends who will go with you, but that's a group, and it's like a safe space as well. So if you're feeling a bit down, it's like you can sort of talk openly and stuff. But I would definitely recommend Mental Health Swims, and if you just Google them, you'll be able to find their website and see all the different places you can swim at, and they're usually once a month in the different locations.
There you go. Sound. And Gaz, if you ever want to try it, keep in mind, I don't like being cold, but I'm shit at swimming. Find somebody else.
I'll keep that in mind.
So yeah, that we're over the hour mark now. So Carly, if you'd like to say your goodbyes, we really appreciate you coming on. With Gaz, he was a little bit nervous because it could have been like a little bit of extra time for him from work. You know what I mean? A little bit of extra learning. But I think you've enjoyed yourself, yeah?
Yeah, massively. It's a subject that obviously I have some understanding of, just with dealing with the kids that we have at our school, but obviously I have very little understanding of adult ADHD. So it's been incredibly informative for myself, hopefully very educational for our listeners as well. So just before you jump in, Carly, I just want to say a massive thank you from my point of view, really, for you coming onto our podcast and sharing your experiences and sharing your history and all of your stories with us. So again, just a heartfelt thank you from me.
Amen. Yeah, if you'd like to say your goodbyes, I'll let you sign off the episode for us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I will absolutely talk about this to anyone and who will listen, really, because I think it's really important to keep the conversation going. And yeah, I'm just really thrilled that you had me on. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely our pleasure. Thank you again.